The first time I met the billionaire's son, I thought he was going to die before the ambulance got there. Of course, I didn't know he was a billionaire's son. To me, he was just a little boy lying on cold concrete outside a church surrounded by frightened adults who didn't know what to do. I had been sitting in my car when I heard the screaming. At first, I ignored it. That sounds terrible now, but it's the truth. I was exhausted. The kind of exhausted that settles into your bones and makes every problem feel one size too big. The screaming came again. Then someone yelled, "Call 911." That got my attention. I opened the car door and stepped into the cool night air. A crowd was gathering near the church entrance. People were talking over each other. A woman was crying. A man kept saying, "Oh God, oh God." I started walking faster. Then I saw the child. He couldn't have been older than 4. His small body was trembling. His face had gone pale. For a moment, nobody touched him. Nobody wanted to do the wrong thing. I understood that feeling. I felt it too. I stopped a few feet away. My heart was pounding. Years earlier, I had studied nursing. Not long enough to earn the title. Not long enough to finish. Life had taken me somewhere else before I got there. What remained was a collection of skills I hadn't used in years. I stood there for 1 second, maybe 2, long enough to wonder if I remembered enough to help, long enough to imagine what could happen if I got something wrong. Then the little boy looked up. His eyes were wide with fear. He looked around as if he was searching for someone. His mother, his father, anybody. The expression on his face erased every doubt I had. I pushed through the crowd. "Give him some room." People stepped back. I dropped to my knees beside him. "Has anyone called an ambulance?" Several voices answered at once. Yes. Good. At least help was coming. The boy's breathing was uneven. His body was still reacting. I focused on the things I knew, one step at a time, one observation at a time. The way I'd been taught years ago. The way panic becomes manageable when you break it into smaller pieces. The little boy made a frightened sound. I leaned closer. "Hey, buddy." His eyes moved toward me. "You're okay, stay with me." I didn't know if he understood. Sometimes children understand tone more than words. He grabbed my sleeve. His hand was tiny. I remember that detail more clearly than anything else. He held on as if letting go might make him disappear. I kept talking. Not because I had some magical way of calming children, because silence felt wrong. Because fear gets bigger when nobody speaks. "You're doing great. Just keep looking at me. Help is coming." The man standing nearby finally found his voice. "Is he going to be okay?" I looked at him. "I don't know." It was the only honest answer. The crowd went quiet. Nobody likes hearing uncertainty, especially when a child is involved. The minutes crawled by. I could hear people praying. I could hear someone crying behind me. I could hear my own heartbeat. The little boy squeezed my sleeve again. Then something unexpected happened. He whispered something. It was so faint, I almost missed it. I leaned closer. What was that? His lips moved. My dad. That was all. 2 words. Not "help me," not "it hurts." My dad. The words landed harder than they should have. Because underneath all the fear and confusion, he was still looking for his father. I glanced around. No father came running. No father pushed through the crowd. No father knelt beside him. Just strangers. A church volunteer. And me. The flashing lights finally appeared at the end of the street. The relief that washed through the crowd was almost physical. The ambulance pulled in. Paramedics rushed over. The professionals had arrived. I moved aside and answered their questions. How long? What symptoms? What had I observed? I gave them everything I knew. One of them glanced at me. "You medical." I almost laughed. Almost. Not exactly. He nodded and went back to work. The little boy was loaded onto the stretcher. As they wheeled him toward the ambulance, his eyes found me one last time. He looked calmer now, still scared, but calmer. I lifted a hand. He gave the smallest nod. Then the ambulance doors closed. The crowd slowly began to break apart. Conversations started. Questions started. People looked at me. A few walked in my direction. I wasn't interested in attention. I was interested in getting back to my children. So I slipped away before anyone stopped me. The church parking lot looked almost empty again by the time I reached my car. Almost. Inside, 3 children were sleeping. My children. Ava was curled against the window. Noah had somehow kicked off his blanket. Lily was hugging her stuffed rabbit. For a moment, I just stood there looking at them. The adrenaline from the rescue faded. Reality returned. The kind that waits patiently while you're busy dealing with other things. I climbed into the driver's seat. The fuel warning light immediately caught my eye. Still there, still blinking, still reminding me that tomorrow morning wasn't going to solve itself. I opened my wallet, $7.83, exactly the same amount I'd had before the little boy collapsed. Saving a life hadn't magically fixed mine. I stared through the windshield. For a second, I wondered what kind of family that child belonged to. Maybe his parents were sitting beside him now. Maybe they were on their way to the hospital. Maybe somebody was crying with relief because he was going to be okay. I hoped so. Nobody should have to face something like that alone. A small voice came from the back seat. Mom. Noah. Half asleep. Yeah, buddy. Everything okay? I looked at him through the mirror. Then at Ava. Then at Lily. Yeah. I started the engine. I think it is. Noah nodded and drifted back to sleep. I pulled out of the parking lot and disappeared into the night. What I didn't see was a black SUV arriving just a few minutes later, or the man in the tailored suit stepping out, or the first question he asked when he reached the church steps. Who was the woman who stayed with that little boy? The mother who kept saying, just for tonight. By the time I pulled into the gas station, it was almost 11. I sat at the pump for a full minute before getting out. $7.83. I stared at the number on the screen while the fuel slowly trickled into the tank. When it stopped, I had 31 cents left. That was enough gas to get me to work. It wasn't enough for breakfast. I told myself I'd figure that part out later. Parents become experts at borrowing hope from tomorrow. When I climbed back into the car, Ava was awake. She didn't say anything at first. She just looked at the gas pump through the window. Then she asked quietly, "Are we getting food too?" Children always know more than adults think. I looked at her in the mirror. Not tonight. She nodded. No disappointment. No complaint. That somehow hurt more. That's okay, she said. We still have crackers. The crackers had been in my purse for 3 days. They weren't exactly dinner, but they were something. You're a good kid. Ava smiled. Then she looked away. I knew that look. She was trying not to make me feel worse. 9 years old. Already carrying emotional weight she shouldn't have understood. The drive to our usual overnight parking spot took 15 minutes. A truck stop off the highway. Bright lights. Security cameras. Bathrooms that stayed open all night. Nobody bothered you if you stayed quiet. We weren't the only people sleeping in vehicles. That fact should have comforted me. It never did. I parked near the edge of the lot. The children climbed into their usual sleeping positions with the efficiency of people who had done it too many times. That realization stayed with me long after they fell asleep. No child should have a usual sleeping position for life inside a car. I waited until they were asleep before allowing myself to cry. Just a little, just enough to release some pressure. Then I wiped my face and leaned my head against the window. 3 hours later, my alarm went off. 4:30 a.m. Another day, another shift, another chance to keep everything from falling apart. The hospital was the one place where nobody knew I was homeless. At least I hoped they didn't. I arrived 15 minutes early. I always arrived early. Being poor makes you terrified of losing the things you still have. For me, that meant my job. I worked as a nursing assistant on a medical floor. The pay wasn't great. The hours were worse, but I loved the patients, especially the older ones. A lot of them were lonely. Some hadn't had visitors in weeks. A few reminded me of my mother. One of my patients that morning was Mrs. Henderson, 82, sharp as a tack, no filter whatsoever. She watched me adjust her blanket. Then she narrowed her eyes. "You look tired." I laughed. "I am tired." "No." She pointed at me. "That's not what I said." I stopped. Mrs. Henderson had a way of seeing things people tried to hide. "You look sad." For a second, I didn't know what to say. Then another call light went off. Saved by the bell. "I'll be back later." She shook her head. "You young people think changing the subject is subtle." At lunch break, I sat alone in the staff room. Most days, I didn't actually eat lunch. I told people I wasn't hungry. It was easier than explaining. That afternoon, I divided the last $20 from my paycheck advance into categories: gas, laundry, food. Every dollar already had a job before it arrived. There was never enough. That evening, I picked up the kids. Ava climbed into the car carrying a paper from school. She tried to hide it. I noticed immediately. "What is that?" "Nothing." "Ava." She sighed. "It was about the field trip." My stomach tightened. Field trips usually meant money. I unfolded the paper. $28. The amount might as well have been $200. Ava stared out the window. "It's okay." Her voice was cheerful. Too cheerful. "I don't really want to go." The lie was obvious. I remembered being her age. I remembered wanting to belong. I remembered how much it hurt when you couldn't. "I'll figure something out." She didn't answer, because she knew I probably wouldn't, and because she loved me too much to say it. That night, Noah asked the question again, the same question he'd been asking for weeks. "Mom." "Yeah, when are we going home?" I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. The answer never changed. "Soon?" Noah looked out the window. "That's what you said last week." There was no accusation in his voice, only confusion. Children assume adults know what they're doing. My greatest fear wasn't failing my children. It was the day they realized I had no idea what came next. Lily climbed into my lap from the back seat. Her hair smelled like baby shampoo from the church bathroom sink. She wrapped her arms around my neck. "I like when we're together." I kissed the top of her head. "Me too." And I meant it. The car was cramped. The future was uncertain. I was terrified most of the time. Yet somehow these children still found reasons to laugh, reasons to trust me, reasons to believe tomorrow would be better. Sometimes I wondered if they were stronger than I was. Later that night, after the children fell asleep, I sat outside the car and watched the traffic moving across the highway. People heading somewhere. People returning home. People with refrigerators and mailboxes and beds. Things I'd once taken for granted. I thought about Michael, about the promises we'd made, about the life we'd planned. For a few minutes, I let myself miss him. Then I stood up and went back to the car. Tomorrow would come whether I was ready or not. And tomorrow required energy. What I didn't know was that somewhere across town, a team of investigators had already begun collecting pieces of my life. Employment records, housing records, medical debt, school transcripts, every struggle, every loss, every sacrifice. And at the center of all that paperwork sat one question from a man who trusted almost nobody. Why would a woman with so little stop to help a stranger's child? 3 days passed before I heard from anyone connected to the little boy. By then, life had settled back into its usual rhythm. Work, gas stations, parking lots, school drop-offs, constant math. Everything in my life seemed to involve numbers. Miles left in the tank. Hours until my next shift. Dollars until payday. One afternoon, my phone rang while I was helping Noah with homework in the back seat. I almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers usually meant collectors. Eventually, I picked up. Emily Carter. "Yes." "My name is Rebecca. I work for the Walker family." I frowned. The name meant nothing to me. "We'd like to thank you for helping Ethan." For a second, I just stared through the windshield. Then I remembered. The little boy outside the church. "How is he?" There was a brief pause. "He's doing very well." I felt relief immediately. Real relief. The kind you don't realize you're carrying until it disappears. "Good." Rebecca sounded surprised. "That's all you want to know?" I looked at Noah, who was struggling to spell the word because. "Pretty much." Another pause. Then she asked if I would be willing to meet Ethan's father. I almost said no. My schedule was already impossible, but something about the child stayed with me, so I agreed. The meeting took place in a private conference room at a downtown office building. I felt out of place the moment I stepped inside. The lobby alone probably cost more than my old house. A woman escorted me upstairs. Then the door opened, and for the first time, I met Daniel Walker. He stood when I entered, tall, well-dressed, confident in the way successful people often are. The kind of confidence that comes from spending years in rooms where people say yes. He thanked me for saving Ethan. I thanked him for letting me know the boy was okay. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes before a large envelope appeared on the table. I already knew what was inside. Daniel slid it toward me. Please. I didn't touch it. What's this? A small gesture of gratitude. Nobody calls a large check a small gesture. I looked at the envelope, then back at him. I can't take that. His expression barely changed. I insist. I'm sure you do. That almost made him smile. Almost. You saved my son's life. I helped until the ambulance arrived. You did more than that. Maybe. Maybe not. Either way, my answer stayed the same. I pushed the envelope back across the table. No. For the first time, Daniel looked genuinely confused. Not offended. Confused. As though we'd somehow switched languages without warning. Emily, this isn't charity. I know. Then why refuse it? Because some money helps. And some money changes the way you see yourself. I wasn't interested in the second kind. I folded my hands together. I didn't help Ethan because I wanted something. His eyes narrowed slightly, studying me, evaluating me. The way people evaluate things they don't understand. I stood. The meeting was over from my perspective. Before leaving, I looked at him. Tell Ethan I'm happy he's okay. Then I walked out. A week later, Daniel contacted me again. This time he didn't invite me downtown. Instead, a black SUV appeared in the hospital parking lot after my shift. I immediately assumed something was wrong with Ethan. When I climbed inside, Daniel handed me a set of keys. I stared at them. What is this? An apartment. I blinked. What? He explained everything. Safe neighborhood. 2 bedrooms. School district. Rent paid for a year. Utilities included. The details kept coming. The offer grew larger with every sentence. When he finally finished, I handed the keys back. Daniel stared at me. You're refusing again. Yes. His patience finally cracked. Not dramatically, just enough. A sharp exhale. A slight shake of the head. The reaction of a man whose solutions normally worked. Emily, your children are sleeping in a car. I stayed quiet. Do you understand how dangerous that is? Yes. Then why are we having this conversation? People walking across the parking lot glanced in our direction. Neither of us noticed. Daniel leaned forward. His frustration wasn't cruel. It was genuine. He honestly couldn't understand. Most people would accept this immediately. I know. Then help me understand. For a moment, I considered giving him the easy answer. Instead, I told him the truth. My children need more than a roof. The frustration faded slightly. What does that mean? I looked across the parking lot toward the hospital, toward the building where I spent most of my waking hours, toward the life I was still trying to rebuild. If you pay my rent, we'll be safe for a year. Daniel nodded. Exactly. But next year, I'll still be the woman waiting for someone else to solve the next problem. His expression changed, just a little, enough for me to see the words land. I continued, I don't need rescuing. Then what do you need? A chance. The answer came immediately, because I'd been carrying it for years. A chance to stand on my own feet again. Daniel didn't speak, so I kept going. I started nursing school. His eyes lifted. I never finished. My mother got sick. I shrugged. Life happened. The explanation felt strangely small compared to the years behind it. If someone gave me a path back, I searched for the right words. That would change everything. The parking lot fell quiet between us. A distant siren echoed somewhere across the city. Daniel looked away first. Not because he disagreed, because he was thinking. Really thinking. Maybe for the first time since we'd met. Eventually he spoke. You'd rather have an opportunity than money. I smiled. Wouldn't you? That question seemed to follow him. I could almost see it. Following him into silence. Following him into whatever thoughts waited afterward. A few moments later, he stood. The conversation was over. Neither of us knew it yet. But something important had shifted. Not in my life. In his. And as Daniel walked back toward the SUV, he looked less like a billionaire with an answer, and more like a father who had just discovered he might be asking the wrong questions. Daniel didn't call me for almost 2 weeks. At first, I assumed that was the end of it. Honestly, I was relieved. My life was complicated enough without billionaires trying to fix it. The apartment offer had been generous, more generous than anything anyone had ever offered me. Part of me understood why Daniel had been frustrated. If our positions had been reversed, I might have been frustrated too. Then life gave me other things to worry about. The Honda started making a strange noise, a low grinding sound whenever I turned left. I tried ignoring it. That worked for about 3 days. After that, even Noah noticed. "Mom, is the car okay?" Of course. The lie came automatically. Children don't need every truth. At least that's what parents tell themselves. The problem was that children eventually notice anyway. Across town, Daniel Walker was having a very different week. He spent most of it inside conference rooms. Negotiations, contracts, presentations, numbers. The kind of work he'd spent 20 years becoming excellent at. Normally, work quieted his mind. This time it didn't. Emily's words kept returning. A chance, not a rescue. A chance. The phrase followed him through meetings, followed him through flights, followed him home. One evening, after another 14-hour day, he arrived at the estate well after dark. The house was beautiful. It always had been. 3 stories, perfect landscaping, every luxury imaginable, the kind of home people dream about. As he stepped inside, he realized he hadn't spoken to his son in almost 3 days. Not really. There had been a few texts to Ethan's nanny, one quick video call that lasted less than 5 minutes, a promise to spend time together over the weekend, the same promise he'd made before, the same promise he'd broken before. The house felt unusually quiet. He loosened his tie and headed upstairs. A light was still on beneath Ethan's bedroom door. Daniel knocked softly. No answer. He opened the door. Ethan was asleep. One arm wrapped around a stuffed dog. A children's book lay open beside him. Daniel smiled. Then he noticed the drawings. They covered an entire wall, hundreds of them. Some framed, some taped up crookedly, some hanging by a single corner. Daniel stepped closer. At first they seemed like ordinary children's drawings. Then he started looking, really looking, and something inside him began to sink. In one picture, Ethan sat alone on a swing. In another, Ethan stood beside a church. In another, Ethan sat on a bench feeding birds. In another, Ethan looked out a window, always alone. Every drawing showed the same thing, a little boy, by himself. Daniel moved from picture to picture. The pattern became impossible to ignore. No father, no mother, no family, no one. Just Ethan, a child drawing his world exactly as he experienced it. The realization hit harder than any business failure ever had. Because numbers don't take things personally. Children do. And then he found the drawing. It had been tucked between 2 others. Crayon. Simple lines. A church parking lot. A small car. 4 figures standing beside it. A woman. 3 children. All smiling. All holding hands. Daniel recognized them immediately. Emily. Ava. Noah. Lily. He stared at the picture for a long time. The family sleeping in a car. The family struggling to survive. The family Ethan had met only briefly. The family his son had chosen to draw. Not once, several times. Daniel pulled more papers from the stack. There they were again. The same woman. The same children. Different versions. Different colors. Different days. Always together. Always close. Always touching. Sometimes hugging, sometimes laughing, sometimes sitting beside one another. The details weren't important. The feeling was, a 4-year-old child had seen something in that parking lot he couldn't stop thinking about. Belonging, connection, warmth, the very things Daniel had spent years assuming money could replace. He sat down on the edge of Ethan's bed. The room suddenly felt smaller. The memories started arriving whether he wanted them or not. The birthday party he'd missed. The school event he delegated, the weekends that became work trips, the dinners postponed until tomorrow. Tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. At some point, tomorrow had quietly become years. A sleepy voice broke the silence. Dad. Daniel turned. Ethan was awake. Barely. Hey, buddy. The little boy rubbed his eyes. What time is it? Late. Ethan looked surprised. You came home. The words weren't intended to hurt. That made them hurt more. Daniel forced a smile. I always come home. Ethan considered that, then nodded politely. The way children nod when they don't entirely agree. After a moment, Ethan pointed toward one of the drawings. The lady helped me. Daniel followed his finger. Emily. Yeah, I like her. I know. Ethan yawned. then said something Daniel would remember for the rest of his life. Her kids are lucky. Daniel swallowed. Why, the little boy thought about it, as if the answer was obvious. Because she always looks at them. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Unavoidable. Children have a way of speaking truths adults spend years avoiding. Ethan closed his eyes again. Within minutes, he was asleep. Daniel remained sitting beside the bed, looking at the drawings, looking at the evidence. Not evidence of neglect, something worse. Evidence of absence. A child can forgive a busy parent. A child can forgive mistakes. What they struggle to understand is feeling invisible. For the first time in a long time, Daniel wasn't thinking about Emily. He wasn't thinking about the money she refused, or the apartment, or the church. He was thinking about a little boy who had almost died. A little boy whose first instinct had been to call for his father, and a father who hadn't been there. By midnight, Daniel was still sitting beside Ethan's bed, staring at the drawing of a struggling mother and her 3 children. And for the first time since his wife's death, he began asking himself a question he should have asked years earlier. What exactly had success cost his son? The Honda broke down on a Tuesday. Not completely, just enough to make my stomach drop. I was leaving work when the engine coughed twice and died at a red light. For a few seconds, I sat there gripping the steering wheel. The cars behind me started honking. One driver threw his hands in the air. Another swerved around me. I managed to restart the engine, but the message was clear. The car was running out of chances. Just like me. That evening, I paid for groceries instead of the mechanic. The next morning, I paid for gas instead of groceries. Life had become a series of trade-offs. Every decision solved one problem and created another. Ava needed money for her field trip. Noah needed new shoes. Lily had outgrown half her clothes. I needed about 6 different miracles. The problem with being broke isn't the lack of money. It's the constant mental exhaustion. You never stop calculating. Never stop adjusting. Never stop worrying. By the end of that week, I felt like I was carrying an invisible weight everywhere I went. And somehow, I still had to smile for my children. One Friday evening, I picked them up from school. The sky was turning orange. Lily fell asleep before we left the parking lot. Noah was telling me about a science project. Ava was pretending not to notice the check engine light. Then she asked quietly, "Mom." "Yeah. Do you think things are going to get better?" Children usually ask hard questions when you're least prepared. I kept my eyes on the road. "I do." She waited. "Really?" I nodded. "Really?" The truth was more complicated. I hoped things would get better. Hope and certainty are not the same thing. But some answers belong to children. Some belong to adults. That same evening, Daniel Walker was reviewing another report. Except this report wasn't about a company. It was about me. Employment history, school records, medical debt, financial hardship, background checks, everything. His investigators had found exactly what he expected. No scams, no hidden motives, no lawsuits, no attempts to contact his family, no requests for money. The deeper they looked, the more ordinary I appeared. And somehow that made me extraordinary. Daniel closed the file. Then he noticed something else. A note near the bottom. Vehicle condition poor. Risk of mechanical failure. Housing instability increasing. Children affected. He stared at those words longer than he expected. A year earlier, they would have meant nothing. Now they felt personal. Because every time he pictured my situation, he also pictured Ethan. And every time he pictured Ethan, he saw those drawings. The following Monday, I received another call. This time, it wasn't from an assistant. It was Daniel himself. "Emily." I immediately smiled. "You're persistent." A short laugh escaped him. Apparently, "What can I do for you?" "I'd like to meet." I leaned back in my seat. To offer another apartment? No. That got my attention. Then what? I think I finally listened. We met at a small cafe near the hospital. Nothing fancy, just coffee and sandwiches. Daniel arrived first. When I sat down, I noticed there was no envelope, no keys, no dramatic gesture. That was new. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Daniel slid a folder across the table. I looked at it carefully. You realize I've become suspicious of folders. That earned a real smile. The first one I'd seen from him, fair. I opened it. The first page carried the logo of a regional hospital network. The second page carried another logo, Walker Medical Systems. I frowned. Then I kept reading. Halfway down the page, my heart stopped. Healthcare Career Advancement Scholarship. I read the line twice, then 3 times. Daniel waited, patiently, the way people wait when they know the information needs time to settle. Finally, I looked up. "What is this?" "You said you wanted a chance." I stared at him. "A real chance." He nodded. "The hospital is launching a professional advancement program." I kept reading. Tuition assistance, clinical training, certification pathway, mentorship. The words blurred together, because for the first time in years, I wasn't reading about survival. I was reading about a future. Daniel continued. "You'd still work." "Good. I know you wouldn't accept it otherwise." That was true. "You'd earn every step." Good. Also true. The program would allow you to complete the education you never finished. I looked down again. My hands were trembling slightly. Not from fear, from possibility. Possibility can be terrifying when you've gone a long time without it. Then Daniel reached for a second document. "This part is separate." I narrowed my eyes. "Here we go." He laughed softly. I deserve that look. He handed me the paper. Part-time caregiver position. Evening hours. Flexible schedule. Excellent compensation. I blinked, then looked at him. Caregiver. For Ethan. I sat back. The proposal made more sense than I expected. "He likes you." I met him for 10 minutes. Daniel shrugged. He disagrees. For the first time, I found myself laughing. The arrangement was surprisingly thoughtful. Daytime hospital work, education pathway, evening caregiver role, housing provided on the estate grounds in a staff residence, not charity, employment, training, responsibility, a future, the exact things I'd asked for. Nothing more, nothing less. I closed the folder. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question that had been bothering me. Why? Daniel looked out the window, toward the people walking along the sidewalk, toward ordinary life. When he finally answered, his voice was quieter. "Because you were right." I waited. "You said I was solving the wrong problem." A small smile crossed his face. It took me longer than it should have to understand that. For the first time since we'd met, neither of us felt like strangers. Just 2 parents trying to do better than yesterday. That evening, after the children fell asleep, I sat alone in the driver's seat. The scholarship documents rested on my lap. The caregiver offer sat beside them. Outside, the parking lot looked exactly the same. The same lights, the same pavement, the same uncertainty. And yet everything felt different. For months, I'd been looking for a way out. Not a rescue, not a miracle, a path. Something I could build on. Something I could earn. Something that wouldn't disappear when the money ran out. I looked at the papers again, then at my sleeping children, and for the first time in a very long time, the future didn't feel like a wall. It felt like a door. The first thing Lily did was jump onto the mattress. Not sit on it, not touch it, jump. The bed bounced beneath her and she let out a laugh so loud it echoed through the room. "Mommy, it's soft." Noah immediately launched himself onto the other side. Ava tried to act mature for about 3 seconds before joining them. I stood in the doorway and watched. 3 children, 1 bed, pure happiness. The room wasn't large. The furniture wasn't expensive. The staff residence sat behind the main estate tucked among several small buildings used by employees. But to us it felt like a palace, because it had something we hadn't had in a long time: stability. That first night, nobody wanted to sleep. The children explored every corner, opened every cabinet, turned lights on and off. Lily kept running into her room just to make sure it was still there, as if someone might change their mind and take it away. Eventually, she crawled into my lap. "Can we stay here tomorrow too?" I smiled. "Yes." "What about next week?" "Yes." "What about Christmas?" I kissed the top of her head. "Probably." She thought about that, then smiled, satisfied. 3-year-olds don't need certainty about the next 10 years. They just need tomorrow. The next few weeks became some of the busiest of my life. Work during the day, classes in the evening, studying after the children went to bed, then several nights a week caring for Ethan. I was tired constantly, but it was a different kind of tired. Hope changes the weight of exhaustion. The work still feels heavy. You just know where you're going. The first evening I officially worked with Ethan, he met me at the door carrying 3 drawings. I made these. I took them carefully. One featured a dinosaur. One featured a rocket ship. The third showed a church parking lot. I laughed. You really like drawing that place. He nodded. That's where I met you. There was no sadness in his voice anymore. Just a memory. Children heal faster than adults when they're given the chance. The relationship between Ethan and my children happened naturally. Noah loved that Ethan asked 1,000 questions. Lily loved that Ethan was willing to play tea party for an hour straight. Ava treated him the way older sisters treat everyone, with equal parts kindness and authority. Within a month, they behaved like cousins who'd known each other forever. Watching them together taught me something. Children don't care much about status. They care about who shows up, who listens, who plays, who stays. Adults complicate everything. Children rarely do. The biggest surprise wasn't Ethan. It was Daniel. At first he remained distant, polite, professional, grateful, but distant. Then little things started changing. One evening he came home before dinner. Ethan nearly knocked over a chair running toward him. The next week he canceled a business trip, then another. A few weeks later, I overheard a conversation while cleaning up after dinner. Dad, are you coming back tomorrow? The question hung in the air. Daniel looked at his son, then answered carefully, I'm not leaving tomorrow. Ethan smiled, the kind of smile children reserve for things they desperately wanted but didn't expect to receive. One night, Daniel arrived home carrying a pizza box. Not catered food, not restaurant delivery. A pizza. Ethan stared at it as though his father had walked in carrying treasure. We're having pizza. Daniel looked confused. Yeah. Ethan grinned. On a Tuesday, Daniel laughed. Apparently, Tuesday pizza was a major event in the mind of a 5-year-old. That night, they sat together at the kitchen island talking about dinosaurs for nearly an hour. I watched from a distance, not because I was eavesdropping, because the change was impossible to miss. The man who once believed money solved every problem was learning a different language. Time, attention, presence. Children understand those things better than they understand money. Meanwhile, my own life continued moving forward. For the first time in years, I wasn't simply surviving. I was growing. The classes were difficult. Some nights I studied until after midnight. Some mornings I questioned whether I could keep up. Then I'd remember the alternative. The parking lots. The uncertainty, the fear. That usually solved the motivation problem. One afternoon, I received my first evaluation from the advancement program. Excellent clinical performance, strong patient communication, high leadership potential. I read the words 3 times, not because I doubted them, because I wasn't used to seeing my future described positively. For years, every document connected to my life had involved debt overdue balances or bad news. This one felt different. This one described possibilities. The biggest moment came unexpectedly. A few months after moving in, Noah climbed into the front seat of my car while I was cleaning it. The Honda still ran. Barely. I planned to keep it forever out of pure stubbornness. Noah looked around thoughtfully, then asked, Mom, yeah, when was the last time we slept in here? The question surprised me. I thought for a second. About 4 months ago. He nodded. Then he smiled. I almost forgot. The words hit me harder than they should have, because children aren't supposed to remember sleeping in cars. They're supposed to forget. They're supposed to move forward. That's the whole point. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I sat alone on the small porch outside the residence. The air was cool. The estate grounds were quiet. Inside, my children slept peacefully. Inside the main house, Ethan slept peacefully too. For the first time in years, all 4 children were safe. Not because somebody rescued us, because somebody gave us a chance to build something better. And slowly, one ordinary day at a time, that's exactly what we were doing. Almost 18 months after the night outside the church, I stood at a podium wearing navy blue scrubs and tried not to cry. I wasn't having much success. The hospital auditorium was packed. Program directors, nurses, doctors, families, students, people chatting quietly while waiting for the ceremony to begin. In the front row sat the 4 children who had changed my life: Ava, Noah, Lily, and Ethan. They were arguing over something important, at least important to them, which was exactly how it should be. Children arguing about nonsense is one of the healthiest sounds in the world. It means they're free to be children. When my name was called, the room applauded. I walked across the stage, accepted my certification, shook hands, smiled for photographs. The whole thing felt strangely unreal, not because I doubted I had earned it. I had. Every late-night study session, every exam, every shift, every sacrifice. I'd earned every inch of it. What felt unreal was remembering where the journey started: a church parking lot, a dying fuel gauge, $7.83, and 3 sleeping children. Sometimes life changes gradually. Sometimes it changes because one small decision leads to another, and another, and another. Or, after the ceremony, several people gave short speeches. The hospital director spoke. A nursing supervisor spoke. Then Daniel stepped up to the microphone. The room immediately grew quieter. People tend to listen when billionaires speak. The funny thing is, the most important thing Daniel ever said had nothing to do with business. He looked out across the audience. Then he found Ethan, then me. And finally he smiled. 18 months ago, he began, I thought I was helping a struggling mother. A few people nodded. The story had become known throughout the program. Daniel paused. Then he shook his head slightly. It turns out I misunderstood the situation. Soft laughter moved through the audience. He continued. Emily didn't need someone to save her. His eyes met mine. She needed an opportunity. The room became very still. And somewhere along the way, while I was trying to help create that opportunity, she taught me something I should have learned years earlier. Daniel glanced toward Ethan, then back to the audience. Success means very little if the people you love feel alone. Nobody moved. Nobody looked at their phones. The room simply listened. I thought I was helping a homeless mother. His voice softened. It turns out she was teaching me how to be a father. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then the applause started, and kept going. That evening, the children insisted on celebrating with pizza. Apparently, some traditions become permanent. We sat together outside near the residence while the sun disappeared behind the trees. Lily fell asleep halfway through her second slice. Noah spent 20 minutes explaining a science project nobody fully understood. Ava talked about middle school. Ethan laughed so hard at one of Noah's jokes that soda came out of his nose. It was not a glamorous evening. It was perfect. At one point, I looked across the table. Daniel was watching Ethan, not checking emails, not taking calls, just watching his son, the way parents are supposed to. When he noticed me looking, he smiled. I smiled back. No words were necessary. Some conversations happen without speaking. A few months later, life had settled into something resembling normal. A phrase I once thought I'd never use again. The children were thriving. Ava joined the school leadership club. Noah discovered a love for science. Lily informed everyone she planned to become either a doctor or a princess, possibly both. Ethan was happier than I'd ever seen him. Most importantly, he no longer looked lonely. Children change when they feel seen. Their whole posture changes. Their confidence changes. Their laughter changes. One rainy Thursday evening, I finished a shift at the hospital and headed toward the parking garage. Halfway there, I noticed a young woman sitting alone on a bench near the emergency entrance. Maybe 19, maybe 20. Her clothes were clean but worn. A backpack sat beside her. She was crying quietly, trying not to attract attention. I almost kept walking, not because I didn't care, because I was tired. Then I remembered another parking lot, another difficult season. Another version of myself. I stopped. The young woman quickly wiped her eyes, embarrassed. I'm sorry, she said. You don't have to stop. I sat down anyway. For a minute, neither of us spoke. Rain tapped softly against the awning overhead. Finally, she sighed. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. There it was. The sentence. The one most people never say out loud. The sentence hidden behind so many struggles. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Years earlier, I had asked myself the same question almost every day. I looked at her backpack, the way she kept glancing toward the street, the exhaustion in her face, the fear. It all looked familiar. "What happened?" I asked. She told me pieces of the story. Family problems. No support. No place to stay. No idea where to start. When she finished, she stared at the ground, waiting for judgment, waiting for pity, waiting for advice. Instead, I asked a different question. "What do you want your life to look like a year from now?" She looked surprised, then thoughtful, then emotional, because nobody had asked her that. Everyone had focused on the crisis. Nobody had asked about the future. We talked for almost an hour. When we finally stood up, I reached into my bag and handed her a card. Not money, not a check, not a miracle. A phone number, a scholarship coordinator, a community housing contact, a workforce development program, resources, possibilities, a chance. The same kind of chance someone once gave me. The young woman looked down at the card, then back at me. "Why are you helping me?" I thought about Ethan. I thought about Daniel. I thought about a church parking lot. I thought about $7.83. Then I smiled because somebody helped me at the exact moment I needed it. She nodded slowly, holding the card carefully, as if it might be valuable. Maybe it was. Not because of the paper, because of what it represented. Hope. That night I drove home. Home. A word that still felt precious. The porch light was on. Inside, 4 children were laughing about something. Daniel was helping Noah with homework. Lily was dancing in socks across the kitchen floor. For a moment, I stood in the doorway and simply watched. Life wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was good. And sometimes good is more than enough. The greatest gift I received wasn't money. It wasn't housing. It wasn't even a career. It was the chance to rebuild my life with dignity. And the most beautiful part of receiving that gift was discovering that one day, if I worked hard enough, I could pass it on.